Hey everybody, welcome back. I am joined today with Mike McCaugherty from CTCI. CTCI is a systems integrator servicing, what would you say, the New York Metro?
New York Metro.
New York Metro territory, which for all intents and purposes is like New York City, Long Island, Northern Jersey, maybe all of New Jersey.
All of New Jersey, yeah.
And by the way, New Jersey is a big state, folks. Like we get left off because the state's small, but we're like the most densely populated state in the country. Show some pride for Jersey.
There's a lot of doors in New Jersey.
A lot of doors in Jersey, and by the way, great pizza too, and don't get me started on that. The reason why I'm here today is we're going to sort of go through the world of mobile credentials from a systems integrator. So CTCI is constantly getting asked, why? Why mobile credentials? We hear this in sort of the industry. We think as an organization we should move to mobile credentials. CTCI is a trusted advisor to their customers, and so Mike's prepared a bunch of questions for me to answer, to maybe bring to his customers, but also to be able to just show to people, right? And have these answers out there for you to understand as you're considering your journey from a physical card to a mobile credential. So without further ado, let's get into the Q&A.
Okay. Phil, thank you very much. So we saw early adaptation to mobile credentials during COVID. You couldn't touch anything. It made a lot of sense. It raised a lot of awareness to the technology. So we then saw momentum. We're past that now, and we're at a point now where people want the convenience and the security of it. So from a very broad perspective, for people who might be new to the technology, could you just please explain to me, what are mobile credentials?
Okay, so it's asking, what is time, or what is the internet? What is a mobile credential? So to truly understand mobile credentials, we have to go back in time. And where we're going back to is like the 1980s, which is when these things were invented. This is a sort of a see-through transparent card, and it kind of shows all the different technologies. I'll throw a bigger picture of this up on the screen. But you know, mag stripe technology, this was invented in the 80s. Proximity cards, or the proximity capability was invented in the 90s, and then we've had iterations of this similar technology. You might call it iClass or MyFair DesFire, so some more secure credentials. And now in the 2020s, we're in technologies like CIOS and MyFair DesFire EV3. But ultimately, it's been developed around this sort of antiquated piece of plastic that I have to keep in my pocket. So what we've done as an industry, and what HID has done in particular, is moved our most secure card technology, our most secure card platform or credential platform, from a physical card to the phone. As we all know, what's the one thing we won't leave the home without these days? That's it.
Our phone, sorry.
Yes, listen, you don't leave home without your lunch or without your phone. And if you did leave your house without your phone, what would you do?
Oh, I'm doubling back.
You turn it around.
Well, actually, given the fact that my phone drives my car, I don't get very far.
That's true, same. So, whereas if I left this at home, I know, hey, Mike, can you lend me your card to get through the door? Or maybe I'll get a visitor pass for the day.
Or worst, the dreaded bathroom card.
Yeah, exactly, like you're back in high school, right?
The Petri dish of all cards, the bathroom card.
Gross, gross. So now in the 2020s, it's like, what else can I do with my phone, right? And to your point, my car starts with my phone. I can get into my house with my phone. I pay for my meals and the grocery store with my phone. I get into a venue with my phone. My movie tickets are on my phone. But yet we're still carrying this. And what you're really seeing now...
Well, the problem is there's a lot of people who look really good 20 years ago in that photo, and they don't want to give it up.
That's true. And, you know, to the detriment of HID, maybe I'll say something a little untoward here about HID, but these things don't die. Right? And so this picture that I took 10 or 15 years ago, I do have friends that say, oh yeah, I've had this card for 15 years. Look at me when I still had hair.
Right.
Or look at me when my hair was still dark. Like, you know, watching the transition of Bob Barker on The Price is Right, from a dark-haired young man to a gray-haired older gentleman. But Bob Barker's card would still be the dark-haired, young, strapping version of himself when he's credentialing in you know, 2020 or 2015, and you know, he doesn't look anything like this. But these cards don't die; they live on forever. And the bigger problem with that is the technology in these cards, if we are not forward thinking and we're still using procs, which is a highly vulnerable credential platform, which can easily be duplicated or replicated, and we're still walking around with that for 10 or 15 years, it's not putting the best practice of the security of your facilities in mind. And that's sort of the biggest transition point for me. It's the security of security. It's this layered approach to security where we know that this device, the phone, is the most secure thing on us, and yet we're still using this antiquated technology from the 1980s. So
Phil, I get asked that all the time with regards to mobile credentials. People say, is it just convenient or is it more secure?
it's certainly way more convenient, but it is also way more secure. So for HID, the credential is predicated on what we call our CIOS credential platform, which is a super high level of encryption. There's a handshake, there's a communication between the credential and the reader. So it's 128-bit AES encryption. There's session IDs associated with that down to the microsecond. So like it's very difficult to pull off things like relay attacks. You would need very sophisticated technology in order to get in between that communication.
I think you also get a layer of unintentional two-factor authentication as well.
Oh,
just by looking at your phone to be able to open up. You can't share your phone from that perspective.
100%. 100%. And by the way, like the thing that we do as humans, where to your earlier point, I've got the bathroom card and everybody has the bathroom card and this thing becomes disgusting. If I said, hey, Mike, do me a favor, can you lend me your phone so I can go to the bathroom? That's not going to happen.
Right.
That's never going to happen. But so going back to CIOS, right? So this is a CIOS credential, and there's this 128-bit AES encryption that's happening between the card and the reader. With mobile, we include another encryption layer over that called the MOB key. So this is a unique encryption key that's on the reader and on the credential. The reader will not talk to any other mobile credential unless it has the same set of encryption keys. And then the 128-bit AES encryption that comes along with CIOS and the session IDs that come along with CIOS also kick in. Whereas this is susceptible to the easiest form of manipulation and misuse, which is this.
Yeah.
If I lose the card, if the card goes missing, I dropped it in the parking lot, that is a major vulnerability to the end user organization,
right.
Because now, especially with return to the office, right? Return to work. Everybody's talking about RTO, RTO, RTO. Somebody that comes to the office on a Monday and a Friday, or the most common day is Wednesday. I come into the office every Wednesday. As I'm leaving the office, I lose my card in the parking lot. I'm not coming back to the office again until Wednesday, which is probably the next time I notice that my card is missing, which means that card has been sitting in your parking lot for 7 days unattended, and now anybody could have gained access to it.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate vulnerability, whereas with this, I lose this in the parking lot, I'm running to iCloud, and I'm deactivating the phone, which deactivates the pass, and I never had to tell the security department because I'm protecting my own security.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we were speaking previously about, you know, the dreaded bathroom card and sharing that card to go to the bathroom. But with regards to RTO, building owners, specifically these Class A buildings, they're raising the amenities. So now we're seeing fitness facilities, we're seeing conference facilities, multi-purpose facilities, and the ability to share that between people, that's difficult.
Yes.
That's a threat.
Yes. And I can't tell you how many commercial office buildings I've been to where, you know, you have a property owner that might have a multitude of buildings, and here's my card for building A, and here's my card for building B, and here's my card for building C, and here's my card for building D, and they're walking around with basically a lanyard with 4 or 5 cards on them. And that's not efficient. But B, again, in the return to work, part of the calculus needs to be the user experience at the end user level. We never thought as security practitioners that when we hand somebody this card, should we be thinking about what their user experience looks like? Right now, I'm forcing you to wear something around your neck or around your waist, and what does that interaction look like in my system? Now, if we take a step back and we look at what the end user experience really is, well, all they can ever do with this is use it as a visual ID, and we'll talk about that. but also just to tap it to a reader. Whereas we move the credential from here to an app on your phone, we can unlock a whole world of possibility, including, especially in these Class A buildings, the ability to show building occupancy. How many people are in the building today? You know what? I'm sick. I see the building is full of people. I don't want to get anybody else sick. Or maybe I'm immunocompromised. I don't want to be in a situation where a lot of people are in the office. I'm going to hang back. Or what's the air quality in the building? Well, the air quality is bad today. Again, maybe I'm immunocompromised. I can't be in that situation. I'm going to work from home today. That's not possible with this. That's only possible when we transition to an app. And you might say, well, Phil, I can have an app and I can have a physical card. Why can't I do both? You absolutely can. But the point is, I can put the credential in the app, which, by the way, if I need the app that has my credential to get into the building, then I'm far more likely to use that app for other things like accessing the amenity spaces, or perhaps you have a restaurant on property, or you want to have a better experience for the folks in your building. What better way to do that than to have a direct line of communication? One of the most common use cases is push notifications. Hey, the elevator bank number 2 is going to be down for a week. Or hey, it's Taco Tuesday in the commissary. There's 10% off coupon. And now I can have that direct level communication. Otherwise, in a commercial building, what are you doing? Maybe you're hanging a sign on a wall and hoping that a quarter of your population is going to see it.
We're seeing so many applications now that are being incorporated with mobile credentials, specifically with return to office and that whole entire experience, which goes into, as you mentioned, air quality. Also, lighting. If you have preferences in your office for particular lighting, if you have a preference for temperature, can also be picked up with your mobile credentials. We can start and end conferences and conference rooms, book meeting rooms based on mobile credentials. So it is invaluable, the technology that exists.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are some providers with mobile access where you can, to your point, book a conference room, check in visitors, and have all the other stuff that comes along with having your access control card on your phone. So yeah, this really is the game changer, but we have to start thinking beyond the physical security market that we've always sort of played in, and we have to think about what else can we deliver to our end customers that gives them a better outcome than sort of what we've always done.
Yeah. All right, I'm excited. Let's dive a little deeper.
Yeah, let's go.
So Phil, we get the mobile credentials, and we're in.
Yes.
We enjoy it. What's the best use? Where should I be using this?
My classic answer is, it depends. Now, I'm paid to say what I'm about to say, but I am also a physical security professional, so I'm a board-certified PSP by the ASIS International Organization. So I will take off my HID hat for a second and put on my PSP hat and talk to you as a physical security professional. Literally everywhere. Okay, so we talked earlier about physical security and the difference between having this and having the credential actually on your phone, and how the phone is way more secure. So as a layered approach to security, if I lose this, I now put the organization at risk, whereas I'm far less likely to lose my phone. But I think a way to think about it differently is, where should I not use a mobile credential? Because mobile credentials, I mean, if you really just want to look at it as like a one-for-one replacement, I'm going to go from something physical to something virtual, that's fine. But there's a whole host of, obviously, features and benefits of moving to that, which we just discussed. But where would you not use it? I'll tell you where HID doesn't use mobile credentials. In our Texas facility and in our headquarters in Austin, we print all sorts of secure documents for governments all over the world. You can't have a phone in these spaces. You're literally by law, there are federal inspectors that will come in and shut the whole operation down if they see a phone in there for obvious security reasons. So in those instances, a physical card is still going to be required, because that's the best that we can do as humans. Now, you might argue maybe biometrics is a good use of that. Of course, now that comes along with personally identifiable information, who hosts my face,
If I'm in that scenario and I can't have a phone, can I use my watch?
You could, absolutely. And
under the same mobile credential?
Good question.
Easier?
Yes and no. So ultimately, the credential is a CIOS credential, but How it's transmitted is a major difference or a major source of differentiation. There's an app-based credential, which is literally when the credential lives inside of an app on your phone. And then there's a wallet-based credential where the credential actually lives in the wallet of your phone. These are two completely different places on the phone. Why is that relevant? Because with a smartwatch, you need the credential in your wallet because this needs to be able to act independently of your phone, right? I need to be able to leave my phone in my car and just walk in with my watch and tap the watch to the reader without having to communicate with the phone. So could it be done? Yeah, 100%, but now we're talking about the difference between app-based and wallet-based.
Got it.
Yep, but yeah, where can it be used? Literally everywhere. Turnstiles, elevator control, tenant spaces, secure print terminals, time and attendance readers, conference room booking systems, like literally it runs the gamut of every single access control application. Ultimately, where it shouldn't be used is anywhere where you just can't bring a phone, which is becoming fewer and fewer.
Right.
You know, like you'd never bring a phone into a skiff, right? So that's not an application for a mobile credential, which is why, by the way, we see as HID the physical credential market is still going to continue to grow over the next 5 years by about 5%. But the mobile credential market in that same time frame is going to take off at a clip of about 45%. So we understand we're sort of sitting at the tipping point of a paradigm shift in the physical security industry.
So Phil, with regards to mobile credentials, we've talked a lot about the benefits. We've talked a lot about the applications and the use cases for it. What if we have a customer, a client, a building that has an older system, 15 years old, tried and true, works perfectly, on the wall, in the closet, in the back room? Can they implement mobile credentials on that system?
Again, it depends. Yes and no. So the way we have to think about it from an HID perspective, the only thing that you need from HID to get this to work is a reader, right? So it's got to be a reader of, let's say, a certain vintage.
Yeah.
So HID for a long time had the multi-class and I-class readers. Now in the modern era, we have Signo readers. That's the most current line of readers from HID. And that was born out of making sure that mobile was first. That's a mobile first, mobile ready reader. I-class and multi-class readers of a certain age can also support a mobile credential. So just like if you were thinking about, well, gee, I have these really insecure prox cards on this older system that's still working, but I recognize I no longer want prox in my environment. I want to move to an I-class or a CIOS or a MyFair DesFire EV3.
Right.
Well, what would I need to do? Well, I've got to change my readers. That's probably the extent of it, because once the credential passes from phone to reader, out of the back of the reader is just a card number.
Yeah.
So if your panel can read a card number, which obviously they all can, then you're off to the races. And in that respect, HID, particularly with Signo and with I-class and multi-class as well, is the most open form of mobile credential because it literally only requires an HID reader. We don't require you to change out your panel infrastructure, which is the most expensive part. Yeah. You don't have to change out any wiring.
Well, I was going to ask you that. So old system was wired 15 years ago. It's got 15-year-old wire. Does that wire need to be replaced and renewed?
Right. No. Now, should it be rewired for OSDP? Because if it was 15 years ago, it's probably going to be Wiegand wiring, and we'll talk about that when we get to more of the practical stuff.
Sure.
But even today, you don't necessarily need to replace the wire to transition to OSDP so long as it's within a certain distance on your cable run. So literally, it could be a panel that was sitting on the wall for 15 years, and I'm just taking out that old prox point reader that could only ever read prox and replacing it with a Signo reader that can support mobile. Now, the next logical question to that is, well, I've got a whole bunch of people on prox cards, and now I'm going to transition to mobile. That transition is not going to happen overnight. It'd be nice if it did, but in reality, especially if you're dealing in a Class A building with thousands of people in it, how do you do that transition? And it's actually a lot more simple than it sounds. So one of the benefits of mobile is this sort of user-based provisioning, or the fact that I don't have to come to an office, get my picture taken, have my card run through a printer, and then somebody hand it to me. And by the way, the whole workflow behind that of who do I ask for a card, which office do I go to, I have to take time out of my day, blah, 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 blah. literally it just becomes an email at that point. You get an email, you download the app, and you're off to the races, which is something we're going to do here because right now on my phone, I don't have a mobile credential for your office.
Yep.
And by the time I leave here today, I will. And that whole process will be done via email. So you have thousands of tenants. They're on procs. You want to give them mobile. On the Signal reader, you're going to enable procs, and you're going to enable mobile. And then once you've transitioned out of procs, or you have a date on the calendar that says by July 31st, procs is going to be turned off, and if you want to gain access to the building, you're going to need this app. And that's it. And actually, in New York City, we see a lot of commercial buildings doing exactly that because they recognize the vulnerabilities associated with procs and even with just physical cards in general, and they just turn it off.
So I was going to ask you about that. So we represent multiple clients, specifically clients who own multiple buildings, and those buildings have multiple tenants. So let's say, for example, client says, yeah, I like it. I like all the features. I like all the benefits. I like the security. I like the mobility of it, but I only want it at the front door. Yeah. I only want it at the amenity space. Whether my tenants choose to do it is really up to them, but this is an amenity that we want to offer as part of the base building.
Right.
Is that possible?
Oh yeah, absolutely, and we see that happening all the time because, as you said, you might have a building with 50 stories, and on each story is a different tenant, and each tenant has their own wants and needs and requirements. And so at the turnstile, at the elevator, and in the amenity spaces, it's mobile. And then when they get up to their office suite, maybe their front door can you still use that same mobile credential, but then as they enter their tenant space, they transition back to a physical card. What we find is a unique phenomenon in our modern times called FOMO, where everybody's like, I'm using my phone everywhere in this building, and then I get up to my office space and I gotta use this thing. Yeah. Right? And so that then spurs on a conversation with the tenant that says, well, how do we do that? How can we put your credential how can we leverage your credential inside of our tenant space? Right. And that's where a relationship with your systems integrator comes into play, and obviously your relationship with HID, which we will work hand in hand to talk about what that actually looks like, because every organization requires their own set of encryption keys. This is one of the things that makes mobile so secure, is that tenant A and tenant B and tenant C, if they all decided to go mobile, each one is going to get their own set of encryption keys for their readers. Now, how do I make sure that their credential can be read on your reader? And we take you through a journey of explanation. It's actually quite simple the way it's done. And actually, maybe I'll throw it up on the screen here. But basically, inside of the app, you can just have multiple credentials. So it'd be no different than carrying 4 cards on you. But inside of the app is 4 credentials. And depending on which reader you present that phone to, it will pull off the proper credential and let you through the door. So it's super seamless in that way, unlike this, where it's like, ooh, which one of these am I going to use at this particular reader? The phone makes that decision for you. And the same is true in wallet. Yeah. Each organization gets a different mob key, but inside your wallet, you see one credential. In that credential are all the different encryption keys, and it knows which one to transmit based on the reader that it's communicating with. Got it.
Got it. So let's go back to that example. We have clients who have multiple tenants within the same building. And let's say, for example, some of those tenants are multinational and they don't have an iPhone. They've got something other than an iPhone. Yeah. How does that work?
Yeah. So really interesting. In the United States, Apple has something like nearly 70% market share. So 10 people in a room, 7 of them are going to have an iPhone, 3 of them are going to have an Android device. Maybe my mom, if she's in the room, she's got like a track phone or something. A flip phone, sure. Which, by the way, is probably running Android as well. So really, there's 2 de facto operating systems. There's iOS and there's Android. Samsung, obviously, is running their own version of Android as well. In Europe and in most parts of the world, aside from the United States, those numbers are flipped. Right. It's mostly Android and fewer iOS devices. So mobile credential spans both platforms, right? So if you have a user with an iPhone and a user with an Android, it doesn't matter. They're downloading an app and they're putting their credential on the app. The only caveats there is the phone needs to be able to communicate either over Bluetooth or NFC. Those are your 2 options. If you have a phone that can't do NFC in the Android environment and it doesn't have a Bluetooth radio in it, then you're stuck. Then you go back to one of these. Right? And by the way, there are going to always be people in your population that do not want the credential on their phone for a variety of reasons. And in those circumstances, you give them a physical card. You know, I get this pushback sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody is going to use it for a variety of reasons. They don't have the right type of phone, which is like, if you don't have an iOS device or an Android device today, and those devices don't support either Bluetooth or NFC, I don't even know what kind of phone you have. Maybe you have an old Nokia brick, right? So okay, maybe there's 1% of your population that's that, and then maybe there's another 1% of your population that like either doesn't understand technology or would rather be technology agnostic and they would just prefer a physical card. That's fine. But if you have 50,000 users and 500 of them are on cards, that means 39,500 people are on mobile, and that's a win for everybody because, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, but there's a huge ROI associated with transitioning off of plastic and into mobile.
Yeah. Well, so stay with that for a second. So we know that multiple phones are an option. It can be used throughout the system.
Yeah.
But if you're anything like me and most users, you're constantly looking for a charge. Your battery's at 20%, you got that 10%, it's outside, you're raining, you got to get inside the building, and your battery's dead. What happens then?
Okay, so this again is the difference between an app-based credential and a wallet-based credential. In the app-based world, the credential literally lives in an app on your phone, as mentioned before, which means if your phone battery is depleted, right, you can't start the phone up, you can't do anything with it. The analogy that I always like to use is like, if I'm listening to Spotify, the music is inside of Spotify. I can leave my phone on my desk, walk around with my AirPods, and everything's good within a certain range, right? If I go to my phone and I quit the app, the music stops playing because the phone doesn't know what to do now. It's waiting for another input. The same is true on the credential side. The credential is always there waiting to be interacted with when you present it to a reader. If you quit the app, or if the phone battery is depleted and I don't have access to the app, the phone's not going to know what to do. The reader's not going to know what to do. That's in the app-based world. In the wallet world, wallet works differently. And I don't know if anybody's ever experimented with this, but your phone battery in an iPhone can be depleted up to 5 hours and still work with a credential in the wallet using express mode. So where that was born out of was in transportation systems. Right? My phone is completely depleted. I can't use it, but I don't have any credit cards on me, and I need to get on the train. Within that 5-hour time span, I could tap my phone to an Omni reader, let's say in New York City, and it will take the credit card information off. So the phone, even though the battery is not functioning or the phone's not functioning, there's still juice in there that Apple provides for this type of service. And that is true in the wallet world. So even if the battery is depleted up to 5 hours, it's still going to transmit the credentials. And then on the other end of that, if your watch is still functioning, you're just tapping your watch to the reader, which, by the way, most folks, when they move to a wallet credential and they have an Apple Watch, this is their primary use case, right? If you go to university, this is how most of those kids, I sound like an old man now.
You are.
I am an old man. But these kids these days, that's how they interact with their library, point of sale, their dormitory, all the stuff that they're doing on campus, they're just tapping their watch all day long.
You've been able to give an excellent explanation for all of the questions that we've got, specifically the questions that we receive all the time. So we're in. We enjoy the product. We appreciate the benefits, but it sounds really expensive.
It always boils down to this one question. But how much is it? All right, I'm in. Now tell me how much it is. It's not the $64,000 question, right? So it's actually far less expensive than you think it is. So for example, in the app-based world, you're looking at an MSRP of $4 per user per year. And you might be saying, well, I'm paying $10 for a Prox card right now. How is that possible? Well, that's true. You are paying $10 for Prox cards are more expensive. A CIOS card might even cost you $5 or $6. Mobile credential is going to be less. But then you're going to say to me, but Phil, you just said the key words there, per user per year. This is a subscription. Aha, I gotcha. Let me explain something to the audience at home. This is a subscription, whether you like it or not. And this subscription actually costs you way more than you think it does.
Why?
Why? Because industry average, and people will argue with me down in the comments, and you're free to do so. Industry average is most organizations churn through their physical cards at a rate of between 15 and 17% per year. Let's round that up to 20%. If you have 10,000 users, that means you're churning through 2,000 of these per year on average, right? Some organizations are more, some organizations are less. If you have a highly transient population, like in commercial real estate where people are hiring and firing every day, you're not getting these back because they're printed on. This is a one-shot deal, and if I lose this, I need to get another one. Now, you say, well, but Phil, it's only $5 and I buy it for $5 and that's it. Well, at a clip of 20%, you're churning through your entire card stock in about a 3-year time span, which means this is a 3-year subscription, period. I don't care how you want to slice it. You will buy this every 3 years. Now, and of course, there will be outliers like my friend who has had their card for 15 years and still has hair on his card, but he doesn't anymore. And we could certainly talk about visual ID cards.
On his card.
On his head, on his card.
Not on his card.
Not yet. If there's hair on the card, we got a whole set of different issues. But let's talk about the provisioning process of this, because this is where costs start piling up and people don't necessarily think about it. So let's assume you're using a high security card and this thing's only costing you $5. The average amount of time it takes to provision a pass, a physical pass, is right around 12 minutes, which that's who do I email? They have to go through an approval workflow. And if it's a larger organization, those workflows are longer. It takes longer for those organizations to provision those cards. So now, what is that labor time worth? That could be upwards of $10, let's say, just for round number purposes. So I've got my card is $5, my labor cost is $10. Now I got to give you a lanyard, I got to give you a plastic sleeve, I got to have that doohickey, that lanyard doohickey that lets me stretch it out. Maybe I've got another $5 worth of incidentals. I'm already at $20 for this. And then there's all the other intangibles. What do I mean by that? Well, I have to have an enrollment station. That enrollment station takes up square footage. How much is square footage in New York City right now? $60 a square foot? You got to have at least 100, 200 square feet associated with this task. What does it take to heat and cool that? Okay. Well, I need a card printer, which means I have card printer maintenance. I have card printer accessories. I can't have just one card printer because if that card printer goes down for whatever reason, I have to have another one ready to go, which means I have card printer maintenance on that one, right? So there's all these intangibles so that by the time you actually evaluate what it costs to deploy one of these, you could be somewhere between 20 and $30. And you're going to churn through it every 3 years. Versus a mobile credential, which yes, is a subscription, but at that $4 MSRP, that's your cost. It's fixed. Is it an OpEx versus CapEx thing? Yeah, absolutely. This becomes now an operating expense, but it's a predictable operating expense.
And I get the new iPhone. It's transferable.
100%. And like in organizations that are carrying around 4 cards to get into all their different spaces, I can have those 4 credentials in one pass and take up one user license. So this would be $30 times 4 versus putting it on the phone is $4 times 1. So that we have to think about this now. This is not a card on your phone. It's a license. It's a software seat that you're paying for that license. And by the way, as many professionals do, maybe you have multiple phones. Do I have to pay $4 for every phone? No. It's one license, gives you access up to 5 devices with multiple credentials on each device. So maybe I have 2 phones, a watch, an iPad, and something else, a burner phone for whatever reason. I won't ask any questions. That's all the one $4 charge. Whereas if you said, well, I got to give the CEO one card for here and one card for here and one card for here and one card for here in all these buildings in all these different geographies, that adds up. And if that CEO loses their card, which might happen on occasion about 17% of the time, those costs are going to continue to compile. Whereas, hey, you lost your phone? All right, no problem. When you get a new one, download this app, put in this code, and you're done. That's the ROI that I'm talking about.
That's the power of it,
Which means, by the way, when we look at those other intangibles, I don't need an enrollment office anymore. So I can leverage that square footage differently. I'm no longer paying for that heating and cooling. I was just in New York City the other day and I walked by a commercial building that had a giant letter D on the outside for their energy efficiency rating. And those energy efficiency ratings are predicated on how you're using energy and how energy efficient your building is. Well, it costs money, time, and effort to heat and cool your card enrollment office. And if I don't have to heat and cool that space anymore, or if I can use that space more efficiently and not use all the computers and the printers and all that other stuff, maybe I can get those numbers up. And this, as security professionals, there's a post that I made on LinkedIn, by the time this airs anyway, where I'm starting to draw those corollaries, sort of what we said earlier. As a systems integrator, your role is to like distill this information and provide it to your end user partners. As security professionals, I think it's our job, especially in major metropolitan areas that are passing environmental, climate regulations and legislation, it's our job to provide them with that best path forward as well. And mobile is certainly part of that. And obviously we can talk about also like the PVC plastic and how that's not great for the environment either. And if these folks have corporate social responsibility efforts or environmental sustainability goals, boy, oh boy, is it an easy box to tick to just get rid of your plastic card.
Okay, so Phil, we've gone through a lot of topics today, specifically regarding mobile credentials. But as a systems integrator, we've got to put this together.
Right.
I often say, we don't make anything, we just make things work. How do we make this work?
So if you don't mind, let's use the whiteboard.
Let's go.
All right, so let's talk about like the whole journey from the credential to the panel. So first thing you got is, let's very crudely and not to scale, draw your phone. We'll call that your phone. Now we've got the beautiful HID Signo reader that's on the wall. Now this is going to transmit to the reader, but the first thing it's going to do is it's going to make a handshake. It's going to say, hey, I've got a mobile credential. And the reader's going to say, does your mobile credential have a mob key on it? And the phone's going to say, why, yes, it does. So the phone says, I'd like to request access to the building. The reader says, send me your mob key. The mob key gets sent over. The reader says, great, I see your mob key. Send me your credential. The credential gets sent. The reader then, outside of the back of it, sends a series of ones and zeros, but that's basically your card number, right? So out of the back of the reader, it doesn't matter if it's a mobile credential or a physical card or anything like that. This is literally just a card number at this point.
Phil, I'm going to jump in if you don't mind.
Yeah, go
You're
for
doing
it.
a great job, but we're always busy. Everybody's busy. And as this transfer takes place, I'm on the phone.
Right.
And I'm walking to the reader and I'm on the phone.
Yeah.
What's happening?
Yeah, so this whole transfer takes place in milliseconds. So with an app-based credential, you can expect about 500 milliseconds. That's about half of a second. So hold on one sec, beep, and move on. With a wallet-based credential, you could be here and have your watch, beep, that's 200 milliseconds, because with wallet, you're going NFC, whereas with app-based, you're going Bluetooth.
Got it.
Okay, and we'll talk about the differences there as well. So out of the back of the reader is your card number. The card number goes to your access control panel. In an ideal world, that would be a Mercury panel. Mercury is an HID company, of course. But it's also the most widely accepted access control panel on the market. The panel then says, does this card number have access or not, right? Based on schedules, based on rules. Access granted, access denied. There's a communication that happens here, and then the reader is connected in some way, shape, or form to your door, and then the door opens or it doesn't. This panel is connected to your, what we call physical access control system, or your head end, your software. That software is where you interface between yourself and the panel, right? Because the panel is like this big red piece of hardware that you have to get all these rules into. So your access control head end communicates with the panel. The panel then takes that information and stores it locally in case it loses connectivity here. And then again, it's just based on rules, schedules, lockdown rules, things of that nature. So when we go to our practical conversation over here, we'll talk about some of the vulnerabilities, because we said, like, this is super secure. This might not be if it's still what we call weakened wiring versus OSDP. So We want to make sure that every link in the chain is as secure as possible. This is a network connection. This is a physical hardwired connection from here to here and from here to here. But basically, that's how the mobile credential works, right? You got your phone, you present it to the reader, the encryption takes place, it transmits the card number to the panel panel says, is this person allowed in here, yes or no? Great, sends a signal over, and then Bob's your uncle. It's the same as a card at that point. The only difference in this whole scheme of access control is instead of a P, you'd have a C here for a physical card. Like literally, that's the only difference. If you'd like to learn more about this, obviously you can contact CTCI or you can contact me. We'll have all of our information down below. So now let's move over to a practical exercise and actually show you what this looks like on a Mercury panel.